Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. I have such an exciting topic and guest for you guys this week. I am joined by Patricia Wooster, who is the founder of WoosterMedia, a best-selling author of over 13 books and counting, and a book coach who works with leaders, entrepreneurs, athletes, and anyone who would like to make an impact on this world using their words. I'm so thankful for having crossed paths with Patricia on Clubhouse and having heard a bit of her story before bringing her to the stage for you guys. I'm so looking forward to letting you guys into how Patricia has turned her story into her superpower. So, without further ado, welcome Patricia to the podcast.
Hello. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So excited to have you here. So, you guys, we've been talking for a while, like back and forth, and I'm so excited that we have this episode. You guys can see right now the title, Your Story is Your Superpower. So before we jump on into this, I would love for you, Patricia, to tell us, what has your journey been like so far getting into writing, and what has writing done for you?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So I went to college for creative writing and psychology. And the day after I graduated, I was told by a family member that I couldn't make a living writing.
Uh,
So, which was very interesting and humbling. So I actually went out and worked in corporate America in software for like 10 years. And then when I had my first kid and I was like 31 and I decided I was going to stay home and I thought, well, I'll try writing a book. It was a total disaster. I sought out no advice. I decided to write fiction, which I have no idea why. And so I pitched some agents. I got a lot of rejection. And then I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and she had worked for Reader's Digest and some of the big publishing houses. And then I'm in Florida. She had moved to Florida to do like freelance projects and stuff. And I was asking her, I said, okay, I'm going to work my way in. I'm going to do this whole like sales thing like I used to do to get into corporations. I'm going to work my way into the publishers. What is the crappiest, because I don't know if I can cuss here, but what
no,
is
you can, you're good.
what is the shittiest job that they need freelancers for? And she's like, oh, fact checkers. Everybody hates fact checking. So anyway, I took like a mini course online. I started fact checking. Well, I was talking to all the best editors, like from all the big publishing houses and things. And I also learned a lot about books because I did over 300 books. And so during that time, I would look at these things and say, well, I could do this because first drafts, I mean, they're a disaster usually. And so I pitched a project to Simon and Schuster, and I was able to, because I had a relationship, I didn't have to do the book proposal, the agent, the whole normal thing. And so I was able to kind of work my way into doing that. And my goal at the time was to, because I grew up with a little bit of dysfunction in my house, was that I wanted to write the book that I wish I'd had at that age.
Mm.
And one thing I remember from being in sales is they're always giving you all these personal development books like Malcolm Gladwell and grit and growth mindset and like all these different things. And I remember reading them going, well, I wish I would have known this when I was a kid. Like when I was a teen, my life would have been much easier if I would have known that like it was going to change, things would get
Mhm.
better, and I would have more control over that. And so I took all of that information and I made it available for kind of a middle school, high school age. So I wrote the book I wanted to have. And
Wow.
so that really helped me kind of, I guess, process a lot of things that had happened when I was younger, but also feel like I was giving back. And I was giving
Mhm.
my kids, because I mean, he was a baby at the time, but I was giving my kids some foundational stuff, some tools.
Wow.
And so that's kind of how all of that got started.
That's amazing. That is so cool just to hear like the evolution of how you got into that, not having to go through it the traditional way, and like having come into that by doing a job and providing a service to them and like building those relationships, and then actually writing something that comes from the experiences that you've had that have like been harmful and hurtful and dysfunctional, and using that and turning that into something that people can take away from and like look at that and say, wow, because that is so powerful. When you really think about it from that perspective of, what did I need when I was growing up that I didn't feel like I got, or that I didn't feel like I had. And now that that now, turning that into something I think is just so amazing, because so many people benefit from that, and it's so relatable and it's so real and raw and vulnerable, and people like, I don't even know how many people have been impacted by that, but I'm sure a lot. I am sure a lot. And honestly, like, another thing that I want to get into with you, we talked about a major lung surgery that you had to have actually around the same time that you had your book deal with Simon and Schuster. And you were telling me, like, wanting to be celebrating that moment and like super excited about that, and then having this happen. So I'd love to hear from you, like, what was that time in your life like, and what was the most helpful for you in terms of making it through that time to be able to celebrate your accomplishment?
Well, it was so crazy because so I was like that awkward, unathletic, little chubby, like kid growing up. Like I didn't have a lot of confidence in those areas, and no one really expected me to. I was like the creative kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I was like 40 years old. I was in the best shape of my life, like the best shape of my life, working out all the time. I had this book deal, like everything looked like super rosy. And so I thought I'd like pinched a nerve in my back or something at Orange Theory, of all
Oh,
places. And I was doing Orange Theory like 5 days a week, and I was playing tennis several times a week. So I
wow.
just thought I hurt my back. And we went to an urgent care because I was like, well, this isn't going to fuck up my weekend. Like, because it was our anniversary weekend and we'd gotten a babysitter for the kids. And I said,
Oh.
okay, well, maybe they'll give me like a painkiller or something. And I go there and they did this x-ray, and all of a sudden they come like running in the room, and they said, you have a spontaneous pneumothorax, which I didn't even know what that was. And they said, you need to go to the ER. And so I'm Googling it on the way there. I'm like, oh, this must be wrong. It says lung collapse. And so, because I didn't have any like pre-existing lung things, and I went there, and even when I was in the ER and the doctor was talking to us and everything, and I said, okay, but when can we leave? Because we have a babysitter, we have the first weekend off forever, like we're going out to celebrate. And he was like, you have an 80% lung collapse. Like, we're checking you into the hospital. Like, what is wrong with this lady? And so anyway, at the time, they kind of wrote it off as a fluke. Like sometimes when people get athletic or whatever, these things happen. But then it happened every single month, and we were getting
Wow.
closer to my book launch date was January. And so in October, I had to have major lung surgery to basically super glue my lung to my chest.
Mhm.
And I didn't tell the publisher because I was afraid, because I was a debut offer, that they would just pull all my marketing support. And after I had the surgery, the doctor said, because I said, should I really be in this much pain? I probably cried or screamed that out because I was kind of a baby about it. But he said, oh, this is like the second most painful surgery a person can have, because we purposely abrase it to create the scar tissue. Anyway, so my recovery was terrible, and my nights and days were all messed up. And I'm very disciplined. Like my
Mhm.
schedule, like I get up, I gotta go to the gym. I have my thing, and I was all messed up. Plus, I was putting this front on for my kids and also the publisher,
Mhm.
and so I just started going back to what like grounds me, which is reading. And so I ordered a bunch of personal development books. I got my journal out, and I did a combination of like reading and scribing, and also just processing what I felt, because I felt like I was having to fake the way I
Mhm.
felt to my kids. I was trying to fake everything. And I felt like I needed a place where I could just process and be honest. And
Mhm.
during that time, I stumbled upon Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning book. And what it
Oh.
is, it's based on these like five really super simple things that you do as part of a morning routine. And at the time, I mean, keep in mind, like it's very simple, but at the time it seemed very difficult for me. And so I started doing it, and it really created the foundation of a routine for me again. And that's kind of when that light bulb went off in my head, that was like, how powerful books can be, how big of an impact
Mhm.
that the right book at the right time can have an impact. Now, if I bought that book today and read it, I'd be like, like, I mean, nothing wrong with the book, but it wouldn't have landed the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it became so important to me to work with people that want to kind of create an impact for other people. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but as to at what point do you make that decision to do that?
Wow.
But I think that combination of like journaling and also perspective can really do a lot, not only for yourself, but what you're able to give to other people as
Oh
well.
yeah. And I love how you bring that up of the right moment, like having that book at that time in your life and the impact that that caused for you. And then like sitting here now and being like, well, if I read this now, it wouldn't necessarily be the same. And that's so powerful because that's it. When you think about it, like think about the books that you've read in your life and like the ones that like shifted so much of how you either view yourself or the world or others or situations that you're dealing with or
Mhm.
obstacles in front of you that you're like, I'm never going to be able to overcome this, I'm never going to be able to like get over this, and then you read this thing and you're like, I never thought of that. I never looked at it this way. I never thought that this view was even a view that you could have to like come through this. And that is so amazing. And that's what I love. I just love hearing that and like hearing that there's things out there that are books that have that power that people can gain from that. And oh my gosh, like I'm just so excited right now. I mean, you guys probably know, like, I'm always like this, but I want to ask you, like, so there's a defining moment here, like in your life when you finally realized. When did you finally realize that your story is your superpower? Was there a defining moment? And if there was, what was that like for you?
So it's interesting because, this question comes up to me a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly if people are talking about memoir, right? And to give it a different perspective is a lot of people will say, I want to share this because maybe I want to help other people. But at the same time, those people are still there's people in my life that aren't going to come out as heroes in this
Mm-hmm.
book. And maybe I don't want that drama or that kind of thing. And I felt like I was kind of in that position from where I started. So that's why I took the route of, with that first book, of writing the book that I needed and not be focused on the kind of the external players to that story or bring attention to it, because for me it wasn't the right time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found was that so we all have multiple stories. And that's the thing. I think people think that their biggest story, their biggest thing that happened has to be their superpower story, which is not true. Because if we look at
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown, okay, she flies on private planes and
Yeah.
sorry, my dog.
Oh, it's
She
okay.
flies on private planes and
Yeah.
she has an amazing life and a Netflix series and all these things. But what does she talk about in her book? There's stories about conversations with her husband or swimming across the lake. And those are the ones that land because we connect to them. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important too, if your story is your superpower, there needs to be a connection piece of some
Mm-hmm.
sort. So for me, like, I have a couple stories that, depending on how long of a story I'm telling, right, that it falls into, because I can get really granular about the rejection process of going through it
Mm-hmm.
and writing. If I'm talking to somebody who's frustrated and say, well, no, it can happen. But then I also have those stories of, the health situation that is a big part of my life, because it's always going to be a part of my life and my story. And so I think it's important to identify that we all have many superpowers. Your book is just one of your superpowers. The content of your podcast is just one of your superpowers. And you'll get more and more superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
I believe everyone will, as they get older. And so I think the important part is the context of sharing it. When you are ready to share it from a scar and not a wound, you're not
Mm-hmm.
still like bleeding out onto the street over it.
Yeah.
I have these people, they'll call me and they'll be in the middle of this terrible divorce and they want to write a book about divorce. And I'm
Mm.
like, no, keep a journal. Like,
Yeah.
this is not, you're processing it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
right
Yeah.
now it's for you. If you write that book now, you're going to actually create trauma and
Mm-hmm.
open wounds for other people because you don't have your perspective yet. wait a couple years, you know,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
then it will be a superpower because you have journeyed through it.
Ah, I love that. Oh my gosh. And I love how you talk about, the amount of superpowers. Cause like I feel like that's the thing too, is people might think, oh, well, this is my one thing. This is like my one story. And then this is it, kind of like this is this thing that happened. And but and then they start sometimes starting to feel like, do I have other things that I could turn into something to help other people? And that answer is yes. And that's the thing. I love how you bring that up, is as you grow and as over time you evolve and you start to have more of these things, more of these experiences, and it starts to come together. And I love how you talk about, the person who called you going through the divorce and wanting to write, like, I'm going to write this about divorce. And, and that's the thing, is like, people have such a good intention. Like, I want to do this and I want to, like use this experience. But if you haven't fully, like you said, like healed from that or gone through that, it's still open, it's going to do more harm to you, the writer. And instead of like, and then that's going to be almost like re-experiencing that on a deeper level and getting even more hurt by that. So that's so important to understand
Well,
too,
you don't
is
know how it ends yet, right?
yes,
You're still in the thick
yeah.
of it. How does it
It's
end?
I know. That's the thing too, is like trying to fit. And then with the book, like how do I end this? There is, I'm still in it. There isn't an ending, so you don't have that. And then, trying to give that perspective to help people. And I feel like is beautiful, and it's amazing that so many people want to do that. But I think it's so important too. And that this is what goes back to the whole topic of this episode, is how writing is so therapeutic and so helpful for your mental health, to do that. Like you said, journaling, starting out with journaling, writing things down, gratitude, reading other books. And then if you decide, hey, this is a story or something, an experience, something inside of you that you want to put down onto paper for other people to hold in their hands and look at and read and take messages away from that, then do that. Do that. But the thing, like, I would love to ask you, like, what has been like for writing, like what has writing done for your mental health? Like when you talk about, like growing up with like the dysfunction in the family and like writing the books for teen empowerment and things like that, like what has that done for you? And like, what has that done for your life doing that?
Yeah, so a couple things is, when I was a kid, I wrote. I
Mm-hmm.
created poems, or I wrote, at the time we called it diary, now it's a
Yeah.
journal, but but it started really young, and it started really innocent, like I hate so and so, they took my pencil,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
little like jotting down things. But as I got older, it got deeper, and it got ways to kind of just get stuff out, especially like that angst,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that comes. But then as I got older, and I'm talking like middle school, high school, older, not old, but it became a way for me to help heal myself, because I think there's so much power there, in that a lot of times we are in situations, particularly kids. Now they don't,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just leave. Um, but even as adults, we are in situations where we feel like we don't have control, but we do have control over what's in here and what's in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a private place to document that and process it, but also to remind yourself that you are valued, that this is wrong, or whatever, that your feelings are valid, I think that helps your mental health so much. It helps your
Mm-hmm.
confidence. And then as I got older, it became less about me. I'm not necessarily, I mean, I'd love to sell a gazillion books, but volume isn't really my goal. My goal is for it to land in the right hands and to help people. And my goal now is really to help other people share their stories so they can help people. But I think we have, as a community, there's so much intellectual property or things that aren't discussed openly,
Mm-hmm.
either because people don't feel comfortable, or maybe there's shame or whatever. And there's so much connection there that we don't know about. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at your neighbors, and if you really could peel back the layers, if you read their journals, you would find that there's so much connection point. And so for those people that are brave enough to
Mm-hmm.
put it into a book that anybody can buy and put their name on it, I think that's amazing, right? And so for me, it gives me a lot of confidence. I feel a lot of gratitude. It just feels good, to
Mm-hmm.
put those things out and help people. But at the same time, I want to kind of go back to, you have to have a protective barrier as well. Is I do see people who over give, and they have perspective of time, but they over give and they lose the boundaries that they really needed. And now their neighbors, their people on social media, everywhere they go, feel like they have this kind of access to what's happening inside of them at all times because they
Mm-hmm.
shared one story. And so I think it's a matter of identifying, what am I going to be comfortable having a conversation with at a bookstore, say,
Mm-hmm.
with, a bookstore signing and having people ask me questions. And as long as you can identify that you're cool with talking about those things, then I think, you've shared the right amount of information.
Oh yeah, and I feel like that's so important because sometimes you miss that piece, right? When you're in the process, you're doing it and I love how that almost brings up awareness of the benefit of writing for your mental health and how, and like you said, doing that since you were a kid and starting with the poems, even like the diaries, all this stuff. And that is so huge because sometimes I feel like like we don't even have an awareness of like the level of severity of how things have affected us or impacted us, because sometimes we do these things to escape from that, or get away from it, or focus on this over here or this over here, and that you know it just stays there and it's like this thing. But then when you can write about that and put it down onto paper and then turn that into something that other people can look at and say, wow, if this person's able to do this, right, and write this book about this and share this, then maybe I can start a conversation. Not like, oh, I'm going to go write a book now. I'm going to do it. I'm going to write my story. And like, that's great. But then I think the beautiful piece of that is like you said, the book's landing in the right hands, the right person accessing that, and like being able to like tap into that and say, wow, and like also like the feeling of not feeling like the shame from that or the guilt or whatever those feelings may be that are weighing so heavily on you that you feel like you can't like talk about it or start a conversation. And I feel like that's another beautiful thing of what writing does too, is it opens up the door for starting that conversation. And that's what I think is cool about book clubs. I mean, like like you have book club, like everyone gets together and like you can talk about these things, and it leads to other conversations that people might be sitting there like, I never thought that I could talk about this with anyone, or I never thought that I could share this. And now you start to feel just better and excited and happier. And like,
I mean,
what do
look
you,
at
yeah.
Glennon Doyle. She came
Yes.
out with Untamed, and everybody's like,
Yeah.
she's my girl. And they're
Yeah.
all personal stories and all the book club. And it was like she gave everyone permission to
Mm-hmm.
publicly say, oh, I resonated with such and such story so much. I remember when that happened to me, or I felt that, like, there was almost pride in being able to be aligned with some of her stories of where she was really going through something. And that's powerful. Like, if, and it's just like when, I'll never forget, like when I used to come home from school, my mom would have Oprah on,
uh,
4 o'clock.
yeah.
4 o'clock in Kansas City, you'd sit down, you'd have a snack after school, and you'd watch Oprah. And the reason everybody thought Oprah was their best friend, the sister next door, is not because she owned 9 homes, which I think is what she did at the time. And it wasn't for the glam. It was when she opened up about her weight loss struggle and failed. Remember, she came out in the black turtleneck and
Yeah.
the jeans, and then several months later, she gained back a lot of weight. It was her struggles with her weight. It was when she finally started discussing childhood trauma, and when she started becoming transparent about how hard it was as a black woman to work her way up in her industry.
Yeah.
That's when she became everybody's best friend. And that's when people were like, I have weight problems. I have this. I failed on this diet, or I had this at home, because certain people are leaders and they build a tribe. And once that person gives permission on a topic, everybody else all of a sudden starts kind of opening up their
Mm-hmm.
hearts And it's beautiful when people do that. And I think we're seeing more pockets of community. You don't have to be an Oprah anymore. You're seeing more pockets of community doing that because we're destigmatizing
Mm-hmm.
things, which we didn't used to do. We just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's uncomfortable conversation. Let's push that. Let's not have that. That's not fun conversation.
Yeah. And
Do that anymore.
I love that. I love that you bring up the destigmatizing because I like that's so amazing to me to see more people feeling like they can share things and be like, oh, I go to therapy without being like, what the
Yep.
hell's wrong with you? You go to therapy? Like, it's like, like having this, like,
Why?
like, what are you, like, what's wrong with you? And like being able to talk about that. And even if like be vulnerable about anything that's a challenge or difficulty or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be, something that was so severe for you that you don't even feel ready yet to have that. You don't need to do that. And that's what I think is so beautiful too, is like just having people like that, who write these stories and put that out there and where it's so relatable and you read that and you're like, oh, wow, I'm not the only one who sits here and is like, this happened. And well, I guess I just have to, live my life and just act like it's all fine because that's what we see sometimes, but I don't know. So that's what I think is so great about stories and writing. And, even if you're not writing a book, just writing out your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, like in your day and like keeping track of that and then being able to go back and look at that and say, look at celebrating yourself instead of sitting there and being like, oh, I didn't get this done, or, like all the stuff that isn't going right, or all the things that are going wrong, like looking at the good things and being able to know that you overcame such a hard thing. Like you overcame so many difficult things in your life, and everyone has done that. And it's like, that's amazing. That's incredible. And if you can share that and talk about it, write it, whatever it is, that is so awesome to me. And I love me. That's why I love people like you who I meet and just like on the internet, wherever we meet or connect. It's so cool because it's just such an awesome sense of community and knowing that other people out there are also so into that and like seeing the passion and like being able to help other people get this out into the world and like communicate that and like let them know that you can do that. This is real. It's a real thing and you can share that and you can help other people. And it's amazing because I think that's so rewarding to me to hear people tell me like, oh, you wrote this thing and, I had no idea that this, happened in your life or whatever. And that this helped me in this way, or this did this for me, or just something like that. I'm like, wow. And it's worth it. And I know you've had that where people come to you and they say that, and they're like, you wrote this, and they reach out to you. They want to like let you know like how powerful your words impacted them for good in their life. And it's amazing. And honestly, like, okay, this is a question I always ask everybody. And this is always the last question I love to ask everyone because you always get a different answer. You never know what you're going to get. But what are you currently doing right now in this moment to master your mental? And mental is the acronym of the podcast. So we got mindset, engagement, nutrition, talk about it, accountability, and love yourself. So what are you doing right now to master your mental, Patricia?
So, going back to, I am a morning routine person. I am
Yes.
a really grumpy person when I miss it. I've discovered, but I get up at 4:30 in the morning, and that
Wow.
sounds like hideous to most people, but because it's that important to me, I could get up later and miss it. And so when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is I read and I
Mm-hmm.
scribe and I drink coffee and I don't worry about my phone or other people's needs. Then there is a podcast with Breakfast of
Mm-hmm.
Champions called Rise and Grind that is always motivational. And I
Mm-hmm.
listen to that as I drive to the gym. And I'm at F45 at 6 a.m. every morning.
Wow.
I work out whether I want to or not. And that's a huge thing, is because since I suffer with chronic pain, I always wake up and feel like I was in a car accident. And so the mental toughness I have found is just as important as the physical work of making the decision to go.
Mhm.
And then my day doesn't start until I've come home, I've showered. While I was working on my book, I wouldn't let myself shower from the gym, which I'm sure my family loved, and my dog. But until I got my words out, because I
Yeah.
found if you're extremely uncomfortable, you will do whatever it takes to get that thing done that you have to do the thing you want. So my day starts like really set up for success. And then when I go to bed at night, not only it used to be like I would say kind of prayers in my head at night, but my first thought are I have to come up with 3 gratitude statements that are very specific to that day. So it
Mhm.
can't be like I'm grateful for my kids. No, I have to be like something one of them did, because I think it's like prayers, we get wrote about it. Like I remember
Mhm.
growing up, and before, I grew up Catholic. I'm not Catholic
Yeah,
anymore,
me
but I
too.
grew up Catholic, and you
Yeah.
like bless the food. It was anybody even listening to the words? Half
I
the
know.
time, the words kind of like blurred into each other. You don't pay attention when you do this. So if you express gratitude, grateful for my husband, you're not really breathing into it.
Mhm.
And so if you have to come up with something new and attach importance to it, and then sometimes what I do, which I love, but sometimes I fall asleep, is a body scan. So when I used to do yoga all the time, they would have you relax
Mhm.
starting at your toes or at your head and take your whole body and like focus on your fingers. And when my kids are little, I used to have them do that when they laid in bed. I would have them
Oh.
close their eyes and I would walk them through a body scan because they were hyper, not because
Yeah.
not because I was this great like mindset
That's
mom, but and so self-care is super important. And I notice, I mean, almost like within 48 hours, if I'm not doing those things,
Mhm.
everything shifts. And my
Oh yeah.
perspective on myself and everyone around me shifts as well. And so I'm very big on you need to be protective. I know sometimes we're so busy, but everybody has 20 minutes during the day that they can find to take care of themselves.
Mhm.
Mine happens to last like multiple hours, but that's because I start at 4:30. You know what I mean? Like I
Mhm.
prioritized it. It's not because I love getting up at 4:30, but it's a priority. And so
Wow. Mhm.
I think it's important for everybody to find their own routine. And that's
Mhm.
something else that has been normalized, whether it's a miracle morning or Robin Sharma is awesome. The 5 a.m.
Mhm.
Club is an amazing book, but there's a lot of different practices that you can pick up and then adapt
Mhm.
somebody else's into what fits for you. But I think it's really important.
Oh my gosh, you just
Long
said
answer.
so many, no, so many good things. And I'm so happy you said all of that because that is amazing. Self-care, just like you're inspiring me. You're making me want to do like get up at like 4:30 and like you're holding, but it's so true. That routine is so true. And especially what you said about the whole gratitude thing of trying to make it specific to that day instead of just like my family or my, all these things, right? Make it specific. And that is, I've never heard it like that before. I love that. I love that you said that because yeah, I'm gonna have to write that down and put on a sticky note over here and keep
I
it.
think it was like Gary Vaynerchuk. There was like a podcast
Yes.
with Gary Vaynerchuk
Mm-hmm.
and Tony Robbins. Okay, two very different people, and they were going through their routine, their
Yeah.
gratitude practice, and it was
Mm-hmm.
really funny because Tony's was very like what you would expect, like when
Yeah.
somebody explains their perfect routine and the perfect way to do gratitude and all this stuff. And Gary V was very like he goes, I'm very much like, I am grateful because I didn't fucking die today. I'm
Yeah.
grateful. Like, it was all
Yeah.
very
That's
like
how
this.
yeah.
But he said, it works for me. When I try to
Yeah.
use the woo woo talk, that's not me. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just faking it. It doesn't resonate for me. But
Yeah.
everything, his whole routine was super gritty. But he said, because I've tried everybody else's, it doesn't work.
Oh. Mm-hmm. No, that's
So
so
it's you.
yeah.
You
Oh
have to
yeah.
adapt it.
I
But I
love
thought that
that.
was hilarious, and he gave a lot more examples that were really crude, and I was cracking up. They were really funny, but
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I honestly, I feel like I could just talk to you the entire day. Like we could be doing this for hours. And I loved having you come on. I love
thank
your
you so
story.
much.
I love what you have done with your life. It's amazing. Like that's so 13 books and counting. Like I'm like, wow, like all the stuff that you've done and contributed and put out into this world. And it's like to not even understand fully like the impact that you have on other people is incredible. And honestly, I just want to thank you again for giving me some time in your day to come out here
Thank
on
you for
Master Your
having
Mental
me.
and have this conversation with me. So, Patricia, thank you so much. It has been the best time.
Thank you. I love being here.
Yes.
Glad we were able to finally connect
I
in
know.
person.
Yeah, and make it happen. Oh my gosh. And you guys, whether or you are listening to this in the morning or nighttime, I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. And I'm going to end it on that note and say bye to you guys and bye to Patricia. And thanks for coming out. So, bye.
Bye.